I stared at the lottery ticket in my trembling hands, the numbers matching perfectly with those flashing across my television screen. $65 million. After working 3 jobs for most of my adult life, after sacrificing everything, for a family that barely remembered I existed, the universe had finally decided to smile upon me. I, Margaret Wilson, at 67 years old, was now worth more money than I could ever spend in what remained of my lifetime. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My first thought wasn't about what I would buy for myself. No, my mind immediately went to my children, to Ethan and Rebecca, and how this windfall could change their lives. I could purchase homes for them in those exclusive neighborhoods they always talked about. I could fund my grandchildren's education, through college and beyond. I could finally give them everything I had been unable to provide during those lean, difficult years. A warm smile spread across my face as I imagined their reactions. Next week was my birthday, and they were supposed to come for dinner. What perfect timing for such a magnificent surprise. The kitchen timer chimed, pulling me from my reverie. I carefully set the lottery ticket inside my jewelry box, the only possession I had inherited from my mother, and returned to the stove. The pot roast had been simmering for hours, filling my modest apartment with rich aromas that transported me back to happier times. Times when my children were small, their faces lighting up at the simplest gestures, a homemade birthday cake, a hand-knitted sweater, a bedtime story read for the 100th time. Those days were long gone. My children were adults now with busy lives. Ethan, 42, worked in finance and lived in a modern townhouse with his wife Patricia and their 2 children. Rebecca, 39, had followed her dream of becoming an architect, recently made partner at a prestigious firm, and was raising her daughter as a single mother after her divorce. I had devoted everything to them, every spare minute, every ounce of energy, every extra dollar. After my husband Daniel abandoned us when the children were just 5 and 2, I became both mother and father, provider and nurturer. I worked as a nurse during the day, took evening shifts at a diner, and on weekends, cleaned houses for wealthy families in the neighborhood. Sleep became a luxury, self-care an afterthought. The dining table was set with my best china, chipped in places, but still elegant. I had splurged on flowers, a bottle of sparkling cider, and ingredients for Ethan and Rebecca's favorite childhood dishes. The pot roast for Ethan, apple crumble for Rebecca, little touches to remind them of home. My birthday fell on a Saturday this year, which seemed perfect. No work excuses, no school activities for the grandchildren. I had confirmed with both of them weeks ago, then reminded them again last Sunday during our family group chat. Ethan had responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Rebecca had sent back, "Looking forward to it, Mom." By 6 o'clock, everything was ready. I had even dressed up, wearing the emerald green dress I'd bought on clearance last season, but never had an occasion to wear. I applied a touch of lipstick and pinned my silver hair into a neat bun. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The constant exhaustion had etched permanent lines around my eyes, but tonight, anticipation brought a youthful glow to my cheeks. 6:30 came and went, then 7. No one arrived. I sent a message to the family group chat. "Dinner's ready whenever you are." No response. By 8 o'clock, I called Ethan. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried Rebecca. Same result. I left cheerful messages for both, mentioning that perhaps they were stuck in traffic and that the food would keep. At 9, I received a text from Ethan. "Sorry, Mom. Parker's got a fever. Can't make it tonight. Rain check?" 10 minutes later, Rebecca messaged, "Deadline crisis at work. Have to pull an all-nighter. We'll call tomorrow. Happy birthday." I stood in the middle of my dining room, surrounded by cooling food and unlit candles, a weight settling in my chest that had nothing to do with age. I had seen Parker's social media posts earlier. He was at a friend's basketball game, looking perfectly healthy. And Rebecca's firm didn't handle emergency projects on weekends. She had told me so herself when complaining about a colleague who tried to contact her on a Saturday. They were lying to me. The realization stung worse than their absence. I carefully wrapped the untouched food and placed it in the refrigerator. I changed out of my dress, wiped off my makeup, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the jewelry box that held a fortune my children knew nothing about. I had planned to divide the money equally between them, to finally provide the security and comfort I had never been able to give. Now, doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying years of sacrifice. The time I worked through pneumonia because we needed money for Ethan's soccer camp. The art classes I paid for by taking extra weekend shifts when Rebecca showed talent with a pencil. The countless school events I attended, exhausted but present, clapping louder than anyone else as my children received awards and accolades. The college tuitions I somehow managed to cover, leaving myself with nothing for retirement. By morning, I had made a decision. I would not immediately tell them about the lottery win. Instead, I would wait and watch. Perhaps their behavior had a reasonable explanation. Perhaps I was being overly sensitive. I needed to be sure before sharing news that would change all our lives. Sunday passed without a call from either of them. No birthday wishes, no apologies, just silence. On Monday, I deposited the lottery ticket at the state lottery office, opting for anonymity and the lump sum payment. After taxes, I would receive approximately $38 million. The financial advisor provided by the Lottery Commission suggested various investment options, and I listened carefully, asking questions that seemed to surprise him with their astuteness. What he didn't know was that I had spent decades managing household finances on a shoestring budget, developing skills that many financial professionals would envy. "Mrs. Wilson," he said as our meeting concluded, "most winners come in here with a list of things they plan to buy. Cars, houses, boats. You haven't mentioned a single purchase for yourself." I smiled faintly. "I've learned to need very little, Mr. Reynolds, but I'll think about it." That evening, I finally received a call from Rebecca. "Mom, I'm so sorry. About Saturday, this project is killing me." "It's all right, dear," I responded, keeping my tone light. "How's Emma?" "She's great. Actually, she's been asking about you. We should plan a visit soon." "I'd like that." I paused. "Rebecca, is everything okay? You and Ethan both missing my birthday seems unusual." The hesitation on her end lasted just a beat too long. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just busy. You know how it is. Listen, I've got to run. Another meeting. Love you." The call ended before I could respond. I sat with my phone in hand, an uncomfortable suspicion forming in my mind. I opened Facebook, a platform I rarely used, and checked Rebecca's page. There it was, photos posted Saturday night. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rebecca, Ethan, their children, and Daniel, my ex-husband, all smiling at what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. The caption read, "Wonderful evening celebrating Dad and Gloria's 15th anniversary." Gloria, Daniel's second wife. The woman he left us for when our children were barely out of diapers. The woman who had never worked a day in her life while I scrubbed floors and changed bedpans to feed the children she now posed with so comfortably. I closed the app, my hands shaking. They had chosen her celebration over my birthday. After everything I had sacrificed, everything I had given up, I wasn't even worth an honest explanation. The next morning, I withdrew $10,000 in cash, a small fraction of my new wealth, but more money than I had ever held at once. I drove to Eastridge, an affluent community 30 minutes from my apartment complex. I had cleaned houses here years ago admiring the spacious rooms and manicured lawns while dusting furniture that cost more than my monthly rent. A real estate agent named Melanie showed me 3 properties. The third one, a Mediterranean-style villa with a garden that wrapped around a swimming pool, felt right. 4 bedrooms, a chef's kitchen, a library with built-in bookshelves. Spaces I had only dreamed about while living in our cramped 2-bedroom apartment. "It's lovely," I told Melanie, "but I'd like to see more options." "Of course." Her smile was practiced but genuine. "May I ask what your budget is? It would help me narrow down the selections." "5 million," I replied calmly. Melanie's professional demeanor slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening slightly before she recovered. "I see. Well, that opens up some truly exceptional properties. Would you prefer to remain in Eastridge, or would you consider Bellwood Hills? There's a stunning estate that just came on the market there." By the end of the week, I had purchased a home in Bellwood Hills for $2 million. Cash, no mortgage. The previous owners had left much of their custom furniture, preferring to start fresh in their new home in Europe. I hired a service to clean the house from top to bottom and engaged a landscaper to maintain the grounds. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about how to pay for these services. I didn't tell Ethan or Rebecca about my move, not yet. But I did inform my landlord that I would be vacating my apartment at the end of the month. When he asked where I was going, I simply smiled and said, "Somewhere new." My next step was to meet with an attorney specializing in estate planning. Walter Abernathy was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office walls were lined with law books and family photographs. "Mrs. Wilson, you mentioned on the phone that you've recently come into a significant inheritance and want to discuss estate planning. Could you tell me more about your situation?" I explained about the lottery win, my 2 children, and my concerns about their recent behavior. "Before I make any decisions about how to distribute this money, I need to understand my options." Walter nodded thoughtfully. "Many lottery winners choose to establish trusts for their beneficiaries. This allows you to set conditions on how and when the money is distributed." "And if I choose not to leave anything to my children?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "That is certainly your right. You can designate any beneficiaries you wish: friends, charities, educational institutions. However, I generally advise clients to think carefully before completely disinheriting close family members. Not just because of potential legal challenges, but because of the permanent nature of such decisions." I nodded, appreciating his candor. "I'm not making any decisions today, Mr. Abernathy. I just want to understand my options while I observe certain situations more closely." By the end of our meeting, I had decided to establish a revocable trust, naming myself as both grantor and trustee. This arrangement would give me complete control over the assets during my lifetime, and the flexibility to change beneficiaries as I saw fit. Walter would draft the documents for me to review. As I prepared to leave, Walter asked, "Have you told your family about your lottery win?" "No," I replied, "and I'd appreciate your discretion in this matter." "Of course. Attorney-client privilege." He hesitated before adding, "Mrs. Wilson, in my experience, sudden wealth can complicate family dynamics in unexpected ways. Whatever you decide, proceed thoughtfully." I drove home, to my apartment, not yet to my new house, mulling over his words. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Mom, can you watch the kids this weekend? Patricia and I need a break." No mention of missing my birthday, no apology. Just a request for free childcare, as if that were my only value to them. I texted back, "Sorry, I have plans." For once, it wasn't a lie. That weekend, I moved into my new home. I hired professionals to pack and transport my few cherished possessions. Photo albums, my mother's china set, the quilt my grandmother had made, everything else I donated or discarded. The furniture that had served me for decades, The appliances I had carefully maintained long past their expected lifespans, the clothes that had been mended multiple times, all of it belonged to my old life. As I stood in the soaring entryway of my new home, surrounded by luxury I had never imagined would be mine, a strange sense of disorientation washed over me. Who was Margaret Wilson now? The struggling single mother who worked 3 jobs was gone. The grandmother who babysat on. Demand no longer existed. I was someone new, someone with choices and possibilities stretching out before me like an unexplored country. For the first time in 50 years, I could put myself first. The thought was so foreign, so revolutionary, that it nearly brought me to my knees. That evening, I walked through each room of my new house, trailing my fingers over smooth countertops and plush furniture. In the master bedroom, I opened my closet, larger than my former living room, and found it empty except for the few items I had brought with me. Tomorrow, I decided, I would go shopping. Not at the discount stores I had frequented all my life, but at the boutiques where I had once cleaned floors while the wealthy tried on clothes I could never afford. But tonight, I would sleep in a king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, in a room that belonged solely to me. No alarm clock would wake me for an early shift. No financial worries would plague my dreams. Just peace and the growing certainty that my life had changed forever. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through windows larger than any I had ever owned. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The lottery win, the betrayal, the new house, my new reality. I made coffee in a kitchen that belonged in a magazine and carried it out to the terrace overlooking the garden. Birds sang in the Japanese maple trees, and the scent of roses drifted up from the flower beds below. It was tranquility of a kind I had never experienced. My phone rang, breaking the spell. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, where are you?" "I stopped by your apartment and your neighbor said you moved out. What's going on?" I took a sip of my coffee before answering. I decided it was time for a change. A change? "Mom, you can't just move without telling us. Where are you living? Did you go to a retirement community? You know you should have discussed this with us first." The concern in her voice might have seemed genuine to someone who hadn't seen those Facebook photos, someone who hadn't been lied to on their birthday. "I found a new place that suits me. Better," I said simply. "And no, it's not a retirement community. But where—" "Rebecca," I interrupted gently, "I've made a decision that's right for me. I'm perfectly fine, and when I'm ready, I'll share more details." "When you're ready? Mom, what's that supposed to mean?" Her voice had taken on that slightly patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being difficult or irrational. "It means exactly what I said." I paused, then asked, "How was the anniversary dinner for your father and Gloria?" The silence that followed told me everything. I needed to know. How did you know about that?" "Social media exists, Rebecca. I may be older, but I'm not technologically illiterate." "Mom, I can explain." "No need," I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "You're an adult. You can choose how to spend your time, just as I can choose how to spend mine." Are you angry with us?" Was I? The question gave me pause. What I felt wasn't as simple as anger. It was a complex mixture of hurt, disappointment, and, most surprisingly, liberation. "No, Rebecca, I'm not angry. I'm just finally taking care of myself, something I should have done a long time ago." After we hung up, I sat in the morning sunshine, contemplating the conversation. Rebecca would tell Ethan, of course. They would discuss their difficult mother, perhaps even call Daniel to commiserate about my unexpected behavior. The thought no longer bothered me as much as it once would have. I spent the next 2 weeks settling into my new home and my new life. I hired a personal shopper who helped me select a wardrobe befitting my new circumstances. I engaged a financial team to manage my investments. I scheduled a consultation with a renowned interior designer to help personalize the already beautiful spaces of my home. Through it all, I maintained limited contact with my children. They called frequently at first, their messages becoming increasingly frustrated as I declined to provide details about my new living situation. Eventually, the calls tapered off. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, a month after my move, the security system announced visitors at the gate. On the monitor, I saw Ethan's car. I pressed the intercom button. "Yes? Mom?" Ethan's voice crackled through the speaker. "What? Where are you? The GPS brought us here, but this can't be right." I hesitated only briefly before pressing the button to open the gates. It was time. From the front window, I watched as Ethan's car wound up the long driveway. Rebecca's car followed close behind. They parked in front of the house, emerging with expressions of complete bewilderment. The children, my grandchildren, spilled out after them, eyes wide as they took in the fountain and manicured grounds. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. "Hello," I said simply. "Welcome to my home." Their faces, if I live to be 100, I will never forget their expressions in that moment. Shock, disbelief, and, most tellingly, calculation. I could almost see the questions forming in their minds. How? When? And most importantly, what does this mean for us? "Mom," Ethan finally managed. "What? How is this possible?" "Please, come in," I said, stepping aside. "We have a lot to talk about." They followed me into the grand living room, the children immediately running to the windows overlooking the pool. Patricia and Rebecca remained frozen, taking in the soaring ceilings, the artwork, the obvious luxury. "Would anyone like something to drink?" I asked, moving toward the kitchen. "Mom," Rebecca said, finding her voice, "you need to explain this. Now." I turned to face them, my children who had grown into strangers, and nodded. "Yes, I suppose I do." I gestured for them to sit, but they remained standing, tension visible in their postures. I took a seat in a comfortable armchair, smoothing my linen pants, another new purchase. 2 months ago, I won the lottery, I said without preamble. $65 million. After taxes, $38 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the children had stopped their excited chatter, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. That's impossible," Ethan finally stammered. "You would have told us." "Would I?" I asked quietly. "The way you told me about your father's anniversary dinner?" The flash of guilt across their faces was unmistakable. "That was different," Rebecca protested weakly. "Yes," I agreed. "It was. Because despite everything, I was planning to share this fortune with both of you. In fact, I had the papers drawn up to give you each a house and $1 million in cash. I was going to surprise you on my birthday." Understanding dawned in. Their eyes followed quickly by dismay. "Mom," Ethan began, his voice taking on the cajoling tone he used when trying to persuade me to babysit on short notice. "We can explain about Dad's dinner. It wasn't what you think." "Actually," I said, "I'm not interested in explanations anymore. What matters is what happens now." "And what is that?" Rebecca asked cautiously. I looked at each of them in turn. These children I had raised alone, sacrificing my own dreams, my health, even my dignity at times, to ensure they had every opportunity I could provide. "That depends on you," I replied. "I've had time to think about our relationship, about what it has been and what it could be. For 50 years, I put your needs before my own. I worked jobs I hated so you could attend the schools you wanted. I went without so you could have extras. I never complained, never asked for recognition. I did it because I loved you." We know that, Mom, Ethan interjected. And we appreciate— I held up my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Please let me finish. The truth is, somewhere along the way, my devotion became expected. My sacrifices became invisible. I became convenient, a babysitter, an afterthought, someone whose birthday could be missed without consequence. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Whether from genuine remorse or the realization of what they might have lost, I couldn't tell. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I continued. I'm saying it because it's the truth, and before we can move forward, we need honesty between us. Move forward? Ethan repeated. What does that mean exactly? I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where a hummingbird hovered near a flowering bush. It means that things will be different now. I will be different. For the first time in my adult life, I have choices. I have freedom, and I intend to use both. Are you cutting us off? Rebecca asked, her voice small. I turned back to face them. No, I'm establishing boundaries. I'm asking for respect. I'm requiring honesty. The money is secondary. But you are going to help us, right? Ethan pressed. I mean, Patricia and I have been looking at houses in Westlake, and with this kind of money— Ethan, Patricia hissed, elbowing him. But it was too late. His words hung in the air, revealing priorities that broke my heart anew. I haven't decided yet what I'll do with the money, I said truthfully. Part of it will go to causes I believe in. Some will ensure my comfort for the remainder of my life. As for you and your families? I paused. That will depend on what kind of relationship we build from this point forward. What does that mean? Rebecca demanded, a hint of her father's entitlement creeping into her tone. We're your children. Of course you'll provide for us. Being my children guarantees my love, I corrected gently. It doesn't guarantee access to my wealth. That has to be earned through mutual respect and care. Patricia, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. Margaret, she began, using my first name as she always did. I think what everyone is trying to say is that we're just shocked. This is a lot to process. Of course, we respect you. I smiled at my daughter-in-law. Always the diplomat. Then show me. Not today, not in reaction to this news, but consistently. Show me that I matter to you beyond what I can give or do for you. This isn't fair, Ethan muttered. One mistake and suddenly we're on probation? One mistake, I echoed. Ethan, when was the last time you called me just to check in? When did you last invite me to dinner without needing a babysitter afterward? When have either of you asked about my dreams, my needs, my life? They had no answer. I don't want your guilt or your sudden attention because of this money, I continued. I want authentic relationships with my children and grandchildren. I want to be more than an obligation or a convenience. Little Emma, Rebecca's 8-year-old daughter, approached me then, her expression serious. Grandma, does this mean you're rich now? Despite the tension, I laughed. Yes, Emma. I suppose it does. Cool, she said with a child's straightforward acceptance. Can we swim in your pool? And just like that, the heaviness in the room lifted slightly. I nodded, and the children cheered, already pulling at their parents for swimsuits that had fortuitously been packed in the car for a planned stop at a community pool later. As they changed in the guest rooms, I prepared a tray of drinks and snacks, carrying them out to the poolside terrace. The normalcy of the act, caring for my family, felt both familiar and different in this new context. Rebecca joined me as I arranged glasses on the table. Mom, she said hesitantly, I am sorry about your birthday. It was wrong of us to lie. Yes, I agreed. It was. I don't want your money, she continued. Well, I mean, I wouldn't turn it down, she amended with a small smile. But that's not what matters to me. I don't want to lose you. I studied my daughter's face. So like mine had been at her age, before life had carved its lessons into my skin. You won't lose me, Rebecca. That's not what this is about. But our relationship needs to change. It needs to become more balanced, more honest. She nodded slowly. I understand. Or at least I'm trying to. That's all I ask, I said, squeezing her hand. Later, as I watched my grandchildren splash in the pool under the watchful eyes of their parents, I reflected on the day's revelations. The reactions had been about what I expected: shock, followed by calculations of personal benefit, followed by a gradual recognition that something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. Whether this shift would lead to genuine change or merely superficial adjustments designed to secure financial advantage remained to be seen. But for the first time in decades, I felt a sense of agency in my relationships with my children. I was no longer the supplicant, grateful for whatever scraps of attention they deigned to offer. I was a woman with choices, with power. Not just financial power, but the power that comes from knowing your own worth. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the terrace, Ethan approached me. He sat in the chair beside mine, his expression uncharacteristically thoughtful. You know, he began, when I was about 12, I remember coming home from school one day and finding you asleep at the kitchen table. You were still in your nursing uniform, and there was a pile of bills next to you. I didn't understand then what that meant. How exhausted you must have been. How worried about money. I remembered that day too. I had worked a double shift after being up all night with Rebecca, who had the flu. The bills had included a final notice for the electric company and a tuition statement from Ethan's private school. A school I could barely afford, but kept him in because of the opportunities it provided. You never complained, he continued. Not once. You just handled everything. And somewhere along the way, I started taking that for granted. He looked at me directly. I'm sorry, Mom. Not just for the birthday, but for not seeing you. Really seeing you. The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes, not because it erased the past hurts, but because it suggested the possibility of something better for our future. Thank you, I said softly. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the children play. Eventually, he asked, So what are you going to do now, with your life? I mean, not just the money. The question surprised me. It was exactly the kind of thing I had been yearning for them to ask. I'm not entirely sure yet, I admitted. Travel, certainly. I've always wanted to see Paris, Venice, Tokyo, beyond that. I smiled. I'm considering options. Maybe starting a foundation for single mothers. Maybe going back to school. At your age? The words slipped out before he could stop them. Rather than being offended, I laughed. Yes, Ethan, at my age. Learning doesn't have an expiration date. He had the grace to look embarrassed. No, of course not. I just meant... Never mind. I think that's great, Mom. As the evening progressed, I ordered pizza delivery, much to the delight of the grandchildren, and we ate on the terrace. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years, perhaps because the dynamics had shifted, perhaps because my children were finally seeing me as a person rather than just their mother. When it was time for them to leave, there were awkward hugs and promises to call soon. I watched from the doorway as their cars disappeared down the driveway, a mix of emotions swirling within me. Hope, caution, a lingering sadness for what had been lost, and a tentative optimism for what might still be built. Inside, I moved through the quiet house, turning off lights, straightening cushions, small habits from a lifetime of caring for a home and its occupants. In my bedroom, I opened the jewelry box that now sat on an antique vanity. The lottery ticket was gone, replaced by the official documents of my wealth, but the memory of that moment of discovery remained vivid. The next morning, I called Walter Abernathy, my attorney. I'd like to make some adjustments to my trust, I told him. Of course, Mrs. Wilson. What did you have in mind? I want to establish educational trusts for my grandchildren, I explained. And I'd like to create a foundation focused on supporting single parents, particularly those seeking education or career advancement. Excellent choices, Walter said approvingly. And for your children? I considered the question carefully. The previous day's interactions had been promising but not conclusive. Words needed to be backed by consistent actions. Let's wait. On that, I decided. For now, I'd like to focus on the grandchildren and the foundation. Over the following months, a gradual transformation took place in my relationships with Ethan and Rebecca. There were setbacks, certainly, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves, times when I felt them calculating what behaviors might unlock my fortune. But there were also genuine connections forming, conversations that went beyond the superficial, invitations that came without requests attached. Rebecca began stopping by on her way home from work, sometimes bringing dinner, sometimes just sitting with me on the terrace as twilight settled over the garden. She shared her struggles at the architectural firm, her worries about Emma, her tentative steps toward dating again after her divorce. For perhaps the first time, we spoke as adults, as women, not just as mother and daughter. Ethan's transformation was slower, more cautious. He had always been more like his father, practical, focused on material security. But even he began to change, asking about my foundation plans, offering to help with investment strategies, showing interest in my life beyond what it might mean for his financial future. 6 months after moving into my new home, I hosted a garden party to celebrate the launch of the Second Chance Foundation, my initiative to support single parents seeking education and career advancement. The garden bloomed with early summer flowers, and caterers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres among the guests, who included community leaders, potential donors, and beneficiaries of the program. Ethan and Rebecca arrived early to help with final arrangements. As I watched them greeting guests, explaining the foundation's mission with genuine enthusiasm, I felt a surge of pride not just in them, but in myself. I had raised children who could grow, who could learn, who could become better versions of themselves when given the opportunity. Later, as the party wound down and most guests had departed, Rebecca found me sitting by the pool, enjoying a quiet moment. "Mom," she said, joining me, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "If you hadn't won the lottery, if none of this had happened, I'm not sure we would have ever fixed our relationship. I might have gone on taking you for granted, forever." She twisted her hands in her lap. "That scares me, that I could have been so blind." I reached over and covered her restless hands with mine. "But you're not blind anymore. That's what matters." "No thanks to me," she said ruefully. "It took you becoming a millionaire for me to see what was right in front of me all along." "Sometimes," I said gently, "we need dramatic circumstances to shake us out of established patterns. The important thing is that when the wake-up call came, you answered it." She leaned her head against my shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that my heart constricted. "I love you, Mom. Not because of any of this." She waved her hand to encompass the beautiful surroundings. "But because you're you. Because you've always been there, even when I didn't appreciate it." "I love you too," I replied, meaning it completely. The hurt hadn't disappeared entirely. Deep wounds take time to heal. But it had been largely replaced by a newfound appreciation for the relationship we were building now. The following week, I finalized my estate plans with Walter Abernathy. The educational trusts for my grandchildren were already established. The foundation was fully funded. And now, at last, I felt ready to make decisions about my children's inheritance. "I'd like to divide the remaining assets equally between Ethan and Rebecca," I told Walter. "But with certain conditions." Walter nodded, unsurprised. "What kind of conditions did you have in mind?" First, the money will be held in trust until they reach certain milestones, not just age-related, but personal growth milestones. I want them to demonstrate consistent care and respect for others, not just for me. Second, a portion of their inheritance must be dedicated to charitable causes of their choice. And third, they must commit to continuing the work of the foundation, at least in an advisory capacity. Walter made notes as I spoke, nodding his approval. These are thoughtful conditions, Mrs. Wilson. They reflect your values while encouraging growth. And one more thing, I added. I want a clause stating that if either of them contests these conditions or attempts to break the trust, their share will be forfeited entirely to the foundation. Understood. I'll draw up the documents for your review by next week. As I drove home from the attorney's office, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The lottery win had been the catalyst, but the real transformation had been internal. I had reclaimed my sense of self-worth, established boundaries that should have existed decades ago, and created a new chapter of life filled with purpose and joy. That evening, as I sat in my garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of golden pink, my phone rang. It was Daniel, my ex-husband. In the months since my lottery win had become public knowledge, impossible to keep secret indefinitely in a community like ours, he had called several times. I had declined each call, not out of bitterness, but because he simply no longer had a place in my life. This time, something prompted me to answer. Margaret, he began, his voice older but still recognizable. Thank you for picking up. Hello, Daniel, I replied neutrally. What can I do for you? He chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. Direct as always. I wanted to congratulate you on your good fortune. The children told me about the foundation. It's a wonderful thing you're doing. Thank you, I said, waiting for what I suspected was the real reason for his call. After an awkward pause, he continued. Margaret, I know this may seem strange. After all these years, but I've been thinking a lot about the past, about us, about how things ended. Have you? My tone remained even, giving nothing away. Yes. And I realize now that I made mistakes. Serious ones. He cleared his throat. Gloria and I are no longer together. The divorce was finalized last month. Ah, there it was. The real purpose of the call. Daniel, suddenly single, again reaching out to the ex-wife who had unexpectedly become wealthy. The predictability of it was almost comical. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, though I wasn't. Not really. Gloria leaving him held a certain poetic justice, but I took no joy in anyone's pain anymore. That kind of bitterness had been left behind with my old life. I thought perhaps we could have dinner sometime, he suggested, his tone taking on that persuasive quality he had always employed when wanting something. For old time's sake, to catch up. 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, such an invitation might have stirred something in me, hope, perhaps, or vindication. Now it evoked nothing but mild amusement and the certainty of how far I had come. No, Daniel, I said gently. I don't think that would be a good idea. But our children connect us and always will. For their sake, I wish you well, but there's nothing more to discuss between us. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Daniel had never handled rejection well. Is this because of the money? He finally asked, an edge creeping into his voice. You think you're too good for me now? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. No, Daniel. It's because I'm finally good enough for myself. After ending the call, I sat for a long time in the gathering darkness, a profound sense of peace settling over me. For most of my life, I had defined myself in relation to others, as a wife, a mother, a provider. Now, at last, I was simply Margaret Wilson, A woman with a past, yes, but more importantly, a woman with a future of her own choosing. The next morning, I received a text from Rebecca. "Her dad called you. You okay?" "Better than okay," I replied truthfully. 3 days later, Ethan stopped by unexpectedly, finding me in the garden pruning roses, a new hobby I had discovered I enjoyed. "Hey, Mom," he called, crossing the lawn to join me. "Got a minute?" I set down my gardening shears. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Yeah, fine." He shifted his weight awkwardly. "Dad came by last night. He was not in a great place." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. Despite everything, Daniel was still their father. "He said some things about you, about the money." Ethan's discomfort was visible. "Suggested that maybe you weren't handling it well, that we should consider some kind of intervention." I raised an eyebrow. "An intervention?" His word. "Not mine," Ethan clarified quickly. "Look, I told him he was way off base, that you're doing amazing things with the money, better than any of us would have." He hesitated. "I just wanted you to know what he's saying, and that I defended you." The earnestness in his eyes, the protective stance he had taken, these were new. For the first time in decades, my son had stood up for me, had seen through manipulation aimed at harming me, and had chosen to warn me rather than side against me. "Thank you, Ethan," I said simply. "That means a lot." He nodded, seeming relieved. "So, need help with those roses? I don't know much about gardening, but I can follow instructions." And so my son spent the afternoon learning to prune roses, the two of us working side by side in companionable conversation about everything and nothing. His work, my foundation plans, Parker's latest school achievement, my upcoming trip to Europe. It was the most normal, natural interaction we had shared in years, unburdened by expectations or obligations. As summer turned to fall, my new life settled into rhythms both familiar and novel. The Foundation's first scholarship recipients began their educational programs, sending me updates that I treasured. I enrolled in art history classes at the local college, fulfilling a lifelong interest that had always been deferred for more practical concerns. I traveled, first to Paris where I stood before the Mona Lisa with tears in my eyes, then to Venice where I rode gondolas through ancient canals, and finally to Kyoto where I found unexpected peace in centuries-old gardens. Through it all, my relationship with my children continued its cautious evolution. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. Rebecca, stressed about a work deadline, snapped at me when I couldn't babysit Emma on short notice. Ethan, facing financial difficulties after an investment went sour, hinted strongly about needing a loan. But unlike before, I maintained my boundaries. I suggested Rebecca hire a babysitter from the service I recommended. I advised Ethan to consult with my financial team rather than offering a direct bailout. Each time, after initial resistance, they adjusted. Slowly, steadily, our relationships became more balanced, more honest, and ultimately, more loving. By the time Christmas approached, I had been a multimillionaire for nearly a year. The novelty had worn off, replaced by a comfortable confidence in my new reality. For the holiday, I decided to host my first family gathering in my new home. In years past, Christmas had been a stressful time for me, cooking for days, spending more than I could afford on gifts, watching my ex-husband's family receive credit for contributions I had made. This year would be different. I hired caterers for the main meal, but prepared a few special dishes myself. I selected thoughtful gifts that reflected genuine connection rather than obligation. I decorated the house with an elegance I had always admired but never been able to achieve before. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell gently outside the windows, my family gathered in the warm glow of the living room. The grandchildren's excitement was infectious as they placed final ornaments on the towering tree. Rebecca and her new boyfriend, a kind history professor she had met through my foundation work, helped arrange presents. Ethan and Patricia, working through their marital difficulties with the help of counseling I had discreetly arranged, sat close together on the sofa, their shoulders touching in a way they hadn't in years. My gaze swept over the scene, this tableau of family connection that I had always longed for but rarely experienced. The irony wasn't lost on me, that financial abundance had ultimately led to emotional abundance as well, though not in the direct way one might expect. The money hadn't bought my children's love or respect. Rather, it had given me the freedom to require both, to establish boundaries that forced growth, to create space for genuine relationships to form. After dinner, as we gathered again in the living room, Emma approached with a carefully wrapped package. "Grandma, we made this for you at school," she said, her expression serious. "But I added extra things at home." Inside was a handmade scrapbook. The first page showed photographs of me throughout the years, holding newborn twins, standing proudly at their high school graduations, cradling my first grandchild. Beneath each image, Emma had written captions. Grandma working 3 jobs to support Mom and Uncle Ethan. Grandma at Mom's college graduation after paying for tuition. Grandma taking care of me when Mom was sick. I looked up in surprise. "How did you know all this?" Emma glanced at Rebecca. "Mom told me. She said you were the strongest person she knew and that we didn't always see it before." The tears came then, unbidden and unstoppable. Rebecca crossed the room to sit beside me, her own eyes wet. "I've been talking to Emma about our family history," she explained softly. "The real history, not the sanitized version. I want her to understand sacrifice and strength when she sees it." Later that night, after the children were in bed and the adults sat around the fire with glasses of wine, Ethan raised his glass in a toast. "To Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who taught us about generosity when she had nothing to give but time and love, and who taught us about dignity and self-worth when fortune finally smiled on her." "To Mom," the others echoed, lifting their glasses. In that moment, surrounded by the family I had always loved, but who were only now learning to truly love me in return, I understood that my greatest fortune had nothing to do with the lottery. It was this hard-won wisdom, this reclaimed self-respect, this belief that it is never too late to change the story of your life. The new year brought fresh beginnings. My foundation expanded, opening a childcare center where single parents could leave their children while attending classes or job interviews. I accepted a position on the board of the local community college, advocating for programs tailored to older students returning to education. And I began writing my memoir, not for publication but for my grandchildren, a record of a life that had known both struggle and triumph. Spring arrived with an unexpected opportunity. A small art gallery in town was closing, its elderly owner retiring without a succession plan. On impulse, I purchased the business, transforming it into a showcase for emerging artists with a special emphasis on work by single parents. The gallery became my joy, a place where I spent most afternoons, meeting artists, selecting exhibitions, hosting small gatherings that celebrated creativity and resilience. Rebecca began bringing Emma to the gallery after school, the child's natural artistic talent flourishing under the guidance of the artists who frequented the space. Watching my granddaughter discover a passion that I had never had the luxury to pursue myself brought a special kind of fulfillment, the sense that through her, something broken in our family line was being healed. Ethan, too, found a connection to my new venture. His company began sponsoring exhibitions, featuring artwork in their corporate headquarters, creating opportunities for artists who might otherwise have remained undiscovered. It was, he told me, the most fulfilling aspect of his work. On a warm evening in May, as I prepared to close the gallery after a particularly successful exhibition opening, Daniel appeared at the door. I hadn't seen him in person since before, My lottery win, nearly 2 years now. He looked older, diminished somehow, but the charm that had once captivated me still lingered in his smile. "The place looks amazing, Margaret," he said, gesturing to the vibrant artwork that filled the walls. "Ethan told me about it. I hope you don't mind me stopping by." "Not at all," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "Would you like a tour?" We walked through the gallery, Daniel asking questions about the artists, the selection process, my vision for the space. For once, his interest seemed genuine rather than calculated. "You've done well for yourself," he said finally, as we stood before a particularly striking painting by a young single mother whose work was beginning to attract national attention. "And not just with the money. What you've created here, the foundation, all of it, it's remarkable." "Thank you," I said simply. He turned to face me directly. "I owe you an apology, Margaret. Many apologies, actually, but let's start with the most recent. That phone call last year, suggesting dinner, implying— well, you know what I was implying. It was inappropriate and self-serving." I nodded, waiting. "The truth is," he continued, "when I heard about your lottery win, it stirred up a lot of complicated feelings. Regret, envy, and yes, a mercenary kind of calculation that I'm not proud of." He sighed. "But seeing all this, seeing what you've done with your good fortune, it's made me realize something. You deserved this. Not just the money, but the recognition, the chance to finally live on your own terms." The words were unexpected, touching a place in me that I thought had long since scarred over. Not because I still cared about Daniel's opinion, those days were far behind me, but because there was a simplicity to his acknowledgement that felt like the closing of a circle. "Life is strange," I offered. "If you had been a better husband, if you had supported me instead of betraying me, I might never have developed the strength that carried me through those difficult years. And without that strength, I'm not sure I would have handled this wealth in the same way." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "So, in a way, my failures contributed to your ultimate success. That's a humbling thought." "I prefer to think of it as finding purpose in pain," I replied. "Everything we experience shapes us. The question is whether we allow it to diminish us or strengthen us." As Daniel prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. "The kids are planning something for your birthday next month. A surprise party, I think. I'm not invited, of course. But I wanted you to know that they've been working on it for months. They're different now. More thoughtful. More appreciative. You've changed them, Margaret." "We've changed each other," I corrected gently. After he left, I moved through the quiet gallery, turning off lights, securing artwork, my mind drifting over the strange trajectory that had brought me to this point, from a struggling single mother to a wealthy benefactor, from someone whose value was measured in what she could provide to others, to a woman who had reclaimed her inherent worth. The journey hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been moments of doubt, of hurt, of anger so intense it threatened to consume me. But through it all, I had found my way to a truth that had eluded me for most of my life. That love, real love, exists in balance. It requires both giving and receiving, both sacrifice and boundaries, and most importantly, it begins with loving oneself. My birthday arrived on a perfect June day, the kind where the sky seems impossibly blue and every flower appears to have opened overnight. I spent the morning at the gallery, then closed early to prepare for a small dinner I had planned with Rebecca and Emma. Ethan and his family were supposedly out of town for a baseball tournament, or so they had told me. When I arrived home, the house was quiet, the driveway empty save for my car. I unlocked the door, stepping into the familiar entryway with a contented sigh. Then I noticed the trail of rose petals leading toward the garden doors. Following them, I emerged onto the terrace to find my entire world waiting. Not just Ethan and Rebecca and their families, but the scholarship recipients from my foundation, artists from the gallery, neighbors who had become friends, colleagues from the community college board, and in the background, the staff who had helped bring my vision to life over the past 2 years. "Surprise!" they called in unison, their faces alight with genuine joy. Emma ran forward, taking my hand to lead me to a seat of honor decorated with flowers and ribbons. "We've been planning forever," she confided. "Mom made me promise not to tell, and it was really hard." The garden had been transformed. Strings of lights hung from trees, tables covered with white cloths held floral centerpieces, and a small stage had been erected at one end where a jazz quartet played softly. It was elegant, thoughtful, and completely unexpected. Rebecca approached, with a glass of champagne. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said, kissing my cheek. "Are you surprised?" "Completely," I admitted, looking around in wonder. "How did you manage all this?" "It wasn't easy," Ethan chimed in, joining us. "You're not exactly the most predictable person these days. With your classes and gallery and foundation meetings, we had to create a shared calendar just to track your movements." The thought of my children collaborating on something meant solely to bring me joy was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," I said simply. "This is perfect." The evening unfolded like a dream. We dined on my favorite foods, prepared by a chef Ethan had hired from my preferred restaurant. There were speeches, heartfelt words from Rebecca about the example I had set for Emma, a moving tribute from Ethan acknowledging the sacrifices I had made, and unexpected testimonials from scholarship recipients whose lives had been changed by the foundation. As night fell and the stars emerged above us, Rebecca clinked her glass to gain everyone's attention. "We have one more surprise," she announced. "Mom, could you come to the stage?" Puzzled, I made my way forward. Rebecca and Ethan joined me, standing on either side. 2 years ago," Rebecca began, "our mother won the lottery. But what she did with that victory showed us that she had been a winner all along. She took an unexpected fortune and transformed it into something meaningful, not just for herself, but for countless others." Ethan continued, "We didn't always see her clearly. We took for granted the strength that carried her through decades of challenges. We overlooked the wisdom that guided her choices when sudden wealth might have led others astray. Tonight," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion, "we want to acknowledge not just who she became after the lottery, but who she always was. A woman of extraordinary courage, compassion, and dignity." Together, they unveiled a large object covered with a cloth. As the fabric fell away, I gasped. It was a portrait, an oil painting showing me seated in the gallery, surrounded by artwork, my expression peaceful and proud. The artist had captured something in my eyes that I had only recently come to recognize in myself: a quiet confidence, a serene self-possession. "This will hang in the gallery's permanent collection," Ethan explained. "The artist is one of your scholarship recipients. She worked from photographs, wanting to capture the woman who had given her a second chance." I stood speechless, staring at this image of myself, not as the exhausted single mother I had been for so long, not as the overlooked grandmother I had become, but as the woman I had finally allowed myself to be. Successful, respected, complete in herself. "Thank you," I managed finally, embracing my children, "for seeing me." Later, as the party continued around us, I found a quiet moment with Rebecca and Ethan. "You know," I said reflectively, "when I first won the lottery, I thought it was the money that would change everything. And in some ways it did. But the real change came from something much more valuable." "What's that?" Ethan asked. "The courage to finally value myself as much as I had always valued others," I replied. "To require respect rather than beg for it. to establish boundaries instead of endlessly sacrificing myself. Rebecca nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. The money gave you options, but you're the one who chose wisely. Exactly, I agreed. And in doing so, I gave you both something money could never buy: the chance to become better versions of yourselves. Ethan's expression grew serious. I'm glad we got that chance, Mom. I just wish it hadn't taken something so dramatic to wake us up. I squeezed his hand. The catalyst doesn't matter. What matters is that when the opportunity for change presented itself, you embraced it. Not everyone would have. As the evening wound to a close, guests departing with warm hugs and promises to meet soon, I found myself alone on the terrace. The lights still twinkled in the trees, and the distant sound of my family clearing up drifted through the open doors. I looked up at the stars, bright and clear in the summer sky, and felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Not for the lottery win that had transformed my circumstances, though I appreciated that stroke of fortune. No. My deepest gratitude was for the insight that had followed. The recognition that worth isn't determined by wealth or status, or even by how much others value you. It comes from within, from the courage to stand in your truth, to require respect rather than merely hoping for it, to give love freely but only where it is reciprocated with equal care. 50 years of putting my family first had taught me patience, sacrifice, and resilience. But it took their putting me last, and the unexpected intervention of fate, to teach me the most valuable lesson of all: that it's never too late to rewrite your own story, to claim the life you deserve, to finally, unashamedly, put yourself first. And in doing so, to create a legacy far more precious than money could ever buy. 1 year after my birthday celebration, I found myself standing on the balcony of my villa in Tuscany. The rolling hills stretched before me, vineyards cascading down gentle slopes, their perfectly aligned rows creating patterns that pleased the eye and soothed the soul. The morning sun cast a golden glow over everything, turning the landscape into a living masterpiece. I had purchased this property 6 months ago, a spontaneous decision during what was supposed to be a 2-week vacation. The moment I stepped onto the grounds of this 18th century estate, something resonated deep within me. Perhaps it was the timeless beauty, the sense of history, or simply the peaceful solitude. Whatever the reason, I knew immediately that this would become my second home. The villa wasn't enormous by wealthy standards. 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen that opened onto a dining terrace, a living room with vaulted ceilings, and a small library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. What made it extraordinary was its location, perched on a hillside with views that changed hourly as the light shifted across the valley. Maria, the local woman who managed the property when I was away and helped around the house when I was in residence, appeared in the doorway with a tray holding espresso and freshly baked cornetti. "Buongiorno, Signora Margaret," she said, placing the tray on the table. "It is another beautiful day." "Buongiorno, Maria," I replied, my Italian still hesitant but improving. "Grazie." She smiled, pleased at my efforts to learn her language. "Your daughter arrives today, yes? And the little one?" "Yes. Rebecca and Emma will be here this afternoon." I couldn't keep the excitement from my voice. "They're staying for 2 weeks." "Bene bene, I have prepared the blue bedroom as you asked, and I will make lasagna for dinner. Children always love lasagna." After Maria left, I sat enjoying my breakfast, contemplating the changes the past year had brought. My relationship with Rebecca had deepened in ways I hadn't thought possible. What began as tentative reconciliation had blossomed into genuine friendship. We spoke several times a week, sharing details of our lives not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest and affection. Ethan's transformation had been equally remarkable, though different in nature. Always more reserved than his sister, he had found ways to show his caring through actions rather than words. When I mentioned my interest in the Tuscan property, he had researched Italian real estate laws, connected me with a reputable attorney, and even accompanied me on the final visit before purchase to ensure everything was in order. The foundation continued to thrive, expanding to include mentorship programs that paired established professionals with single parents seeking to enter their fields. The art gallery had gained a reputation for discovering exceptional emerging talent, with several of our featured artists now represented in prestigious collections worldwide. My phone chimed with a message from Rebecca. "Just landed in Florence. Grabbing our bags, then we'll be on our way. Emma can't stop talking about the pool and the secret garden you told her about." I smiled, remembering Emma's fascination with the small, walled garden at the back of the property. Overgrown when I purchased the villa, I had restored it according to old photographs found in the local historical society. Now it featured a central fountain surrounded by lavender, rosemary, and old-fashioned roses, with a wrought iron table, and chairs perfect for afternoon reading or evening wine. The hours until their arrival passed quickly as I prepared the house, arranging fresh flowers in their bedroom, selecting books I thought Emma might enjoy, and checking that the kitchen was stocked with their favorite snacks. By the time I heard tires on the gravel driveway, everything was ready. Emma burst from the car first, her 11-year-old energy undiminished by the long journey. "Grandma!" she called, running toward me with arms outstretched. "Is this really your house? It looks like a castle." I laughed, enveloping her in a hug. "Not quite a castle, but it is rather special, isn't it?" Rebecca followed more slowly, taking in the view with appreciative eyes. "Mom, when you said you'd bought a place in Tuscany, I pictured something charming but simple. This is incredible." "Wait until you see inside," I replied, linking arms with her. "And the view from the back terrace will take your breath away." The next 2 weeks unfolded like a dream. Mornings spent exploring nearby hill towns with their ancient churches and winding cobblestone streets. Afternoons by the pool, where Emma perfected her diving skills and Rebecca rediscovered the pleasure of reading uninterrupted for hours. Evenings on the terrace, dining on local specialties prepared by Maria, sipping Chianti from a nearby vineyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Rebecca and I lingered over our wine, the air still warm, even as night settled over the valley. "I've been thinking a lot about work lately," she said, tracing the rim of her glass with one finger. "Oh?" I kept my tone neutral, though I had noticed a certain restlessness in her over the past few days. "The firm is offering me a partnership," she continued. "Full equity, something I've worked toward for years." "That's wonderful, Rebecca. Congratulations." I studied her face in the candlelight. "Yet you don't seem entirely thrilled." She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I should be, shouldn't I? It's everything I've been working for. The prestige, the salary increase, the corner office." She took a sip of wine. "But ever since we arrived here, I've been asking myself if that's really what I want anymore." "What do you mean?" "This place," she gestured to the landscape around us, now visible only as darker shadows against the night sky. "The pace of life here. The focus on beauty, on connection, on being present. It's made me realize how disconnected I've become from what really matters." I nodded, understanding perfectly. The corporate world has a way of consuming you without your noticing. "Exactly." She leaned forward, suddenly animated. "Mom, do you remember those sustainable housing projects I was passionate about in grad school? The ones focused on creating beautiful, affordable communities that worked with the environment rather than against it?" "Of course. You had such wonderful ideas." "I've been sketching again while we've been here. Designs inspired by the way these old buildings work with the landscape, the climate." Her eyes shone in the candlelight. "What if I didn't take the partnership? What if I started my own firm focused exclusively on sustainable projects? It was a bold proposition, especially for someone who had always valued security. You'd be starting over in many ways, I observed. Are you prepared for that? That's just it, she said quietly. Until recently, I wouldn't have been. The fear of failure, of financial insecurity, it would have paralyzed me. But watching you this past year, seeing how you've embraced completely new challenges at an age when most people are settling into comfortable routines, it's been inspiring. Her words touched me deeply. For decades, I had worried that my struggles were teaching my children the wrong lessons, that sacrifice meant erasure of self, that love meant submission, that a woman's worth was measured by what she gave rather than who she was. Now I realized that my later transformation had perhaps been the most important lesson of all. There would be practical considerations, I said, thinking aloud. Office space, initial clients, building a reputation in a new specialty. I've been thinking about that too. Rebecca's expression turned hesitant. The foundation's new headquarters. You mentioned you're still looking for an architect. I smiled slowly, understanding her direction. Are you proposing a collaboration, Ms. Wilson? I am, Mrs. Wilson. She returned my smile. A building that embodies the foundation's values, sustainable, beautiful, accessible. It could serve as my debut project, establishing my new direction while supporting work I genuinely believe in. I think the board would be very interested in such a proposal, I replied formally, before breaking into a grin. And I know the founder would be thrilled. We talked late into the night, possibilities unfurling like the roads winding through the Tuscan hills, full of unexpected turns but leading to breathtaking vistas. By the time we finally went to bed, Rebecca had the outline of a business plan, and I had a renewed appreciation for the way Fortun, both financial and spiritual, continued to create ripples of transformation in our lives. The following morning, I woke early and slipped out for a walk through the olive grove that bordered the property. The air was cool, the light soft and diffuse, creating a dreamlike quality that invited contemplation. As I moved between the ancient trees, their gnarled trunks testament to centuries of endurance, I thought about Rebecca's evolving dreams and the courage it took to change direction mid-career. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a message from Ethan. Good news! Parker made the National Science Finals. Competition is in Boston next month. Any chance you might be back from Italy in time to attend? He'd love to have his grandmother there. The simple request, so different from the manipulative tactics of the past, warmed my heart. I typed back immediately. Wouldn't miss it for the world. So proud of him. Give him my love. I continued my walk, making a mental note to arrange my return flight to accommodate the science competition. These were the moments that mattered. Now, not obligations born of guilt or manipulation, but genuine invitations to share in my family's lives, offered with respect for my own schedule and priorities. Returning to the villa, I found Rebecca and Emma in the kitchen, attempting to make crepes under Maria's patient guidance. Flour dusted Emma's cheeks, and Rebecca's usually perfect hair was coming loose from its ponytail. They were laughing, completely absorbed in their culinary adventure. "Grandma," Emma called when she spotted me. "We're making breakfast. Maria says I have natural talent." "Maria is very wise," I replied, accepting a cup of coffee from Rebecca. Those crepes looked delicious. As we ate on the terrace, Emma regaled us with plans for the day, which apparently included swimming, exploring the secret garden, and convincing someone, preferably me, to drive to the gelateria in the nearby village. Her enthusiasm was infectious, her presence a reminder of life's continuing cycles, and the joy of experiencing familiar pleasures through new eyes. After breakfast, Rebecca and Emma headed to the pool while I made some calls related to foundation business. My assistant in the States, Diane, updated me on the progress of our latest initiatives and reminded me of upcoming board meetings that would require my presence once I returned. By the way, she added before ending our call, that profile on you for Women in Philanthropy magazine came out yesterday. They did a beautiful job. I've sent a copy to the villa, but it won't arrive until next week. Thank you, Diane. Could you email me the digital version? Already done. And Margaret, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. You're inspiring a lot of people. After we hung up, I opened my email to find the article. The headline read, Margaret Wilson, Redefining Success and Service at 70. Beside it was a photograph taken at the gallery, showing me in conversation with a young artist whose work we had recently featured. The image captured a moment of genuine connection. Both of us leaning forward slightly, completely engaged in the exchange, surrounded by vibrant canvases that seemed to pulse with life, even in still photography. The article itself was thoughtful and nuanced, focusing not just on the financial aspects of my philanthropy, but on the philosophy behind it. The emphasis on empowerment rather than dependency, on creating sustainable change rather than temporary relief. It traced my journey from single motherhood through career success to unexpected wealth, framing the lottery win not as the most significant event in my life, but as a catalyst that accelerated a process of self-discovery already underway. What moved me most were the quotes from scholarship recipients, gallery artists, and foundation partners, speaking about the impact of our work together. Their words reflected exactly what I had hoped to achieve. Not gratitude directed toward me personally, but pride in their own accomplishments made possible through expanded opportunities. I was still reflecting on the article when Rebecca appeared, in the doorway wrapped in a towel, her skin glowing from the morning sun. Emma's determined to perfect her cannonball technique, she explained with a smile. I needed a little break from the splashing. She gestured to my laptop. Work? Not exactly. A magazine article about the foundation was just published. I was reading it. Oh? May I see? I turned the screen toward her, watching as she scanned the text, her expression growing increasingly thoughtful. When she finished, she looked up with eyes that were suspiciously bright. Mom, this is remarkable. Not just what you've accomplished, but how you're being recognized for it. The way they've captured your vision. She shook her head slightly. I remember when you used to clip newspaper articles about my school awards or Ethan's sports achievements and put them on the refrigerator. How does it feel to be the one in the spotlight? The question gave me pause. How did it feel? There was satisfaction, certainly, in seeing my work acknowledged, pride in what the foundation had achieved. But there was something else, too. A sense of rightness, of alignment between my outward actions and my inward values that had been missing for much of my life. It feels like coming home to myself, I said finally. Like all the scattered pieces of who I am have finally come together in a coherent whole. Rebecca nodded slowly. That makes perfect sense, actually. She glanced back at the screen. They mention here that you're working on a memoir. Is that true? In a manner of speaking, I've been recording my thoughts, experiences, lessons learned. Not for publication, it's far too personal for that, but as a legacy of sorts. For Emma and Parker and any other grandchildren who might come along. I smiled. And for myself, too. There's something clarifying about putting your life story into words. I'd like to read it someday, if you'd be willing to share. I'd like that too, I replied, touched by her interest. Though I should warn you, you don't always come off as the heroine in earlier chapters. She laughed, a free, unself-conscious sound that reminded me of her childhood. I should hope not. It wouldn't be honest otherwise. Her expression sobered. You know, one of the most valuable lessons I've learned from you recently is that true relationships can withstand honesty. They're actually strengthened by it. A shout from the pool interrupted our conversation, Emma calling for her mother to witness her newly perfected dive. Rebecca stood, adjusting her towel. "Duty calls," she said with a wry smile. "But Mom, thanks for this." She gestured toward the laptop, encompassing both the article and our conversation, "for showing me what's possible." After she left, I returned to the terrace, drawn again to the view that never failed to center me. The hills, the vineyards, the distant church spire catching the midday sun, all of it so ancient and yet so vibrantly alive. Like me, I thought with a small smile. Aged but not diminished, marked by time but still capable of growth, of beauty, of meaningful contribution. The rest of Rebecca and Emma's visit passed too quickly, filled with small adventures and quiet, moments of connection. We toured a medieval castle, attended a village festival where Emma danced with local children despite the language barrier, and spent an afternoon at a family-owned vineyard, learning about wine production from soil to bottle. In the evenings, we often played board games on the terrace, competitive spirits high, laughter echoing across the valley as darkness fell. On their final night, I arranged a special dinner at a restaurant in a nearby hilltop town where we dined, on the terrace overlooking a panorama of breathtaking beauty. As we finished our dessert, panna cotta for Emma, tiramisu for Rebecca and me, the waiter arrived with a small package wrapped in elegant paper. "For me?" Emma asked, eyes wide. With surprise. "For all of us," I replied. "A memory to share." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet for Emma, engraved with the coordinates of the villa. For Rebecca, a similar necklace, and for myself, a matching piece. "Wherever we are in the world," I explained as they examined their gifts, "we'll always be connected to this place, to this time we've shared." Emma immediately put on her bracelet, admiring how it caught the light. "It's beautiful, Grandma. I'll never take it off." Rebecca's reaction was quieter, but no less emotional. She fastened the necklace around her throat, then reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." The next morning brought the inevitable goodbyes, Emma clinging to me a moment longer than usual, Rebecca promising to call as soon as they landed. As their car disappeared down the driveway, I felt the familiar mixture of sadness and contentment that accompanies such partings when they're founded on love rather than obligation. They would return, as would I to them. Our connections were no longer fragile things that might snap under the strain of distance or disagreement, but resilient bonds strengthened by genuine care and mutual respect. I spent the afternoon in the secret garden, reading and occasionally making notes for my memoir. The chapter I was currently working on dealt with the period immediately following my lottery win. The revelations about my children's betrayal, the difficult decisions about how to respond, the tentative steps toward healing. It was not easy material to revisit, but I was committed to honesty in my account, believing that the true value of my story lay in its authenticity. As twilight descended, I closed my notebook and simply sat, absorbing the beauty around me. The garden lights came on automatically, casting a gentle glow over the fountain and illuminating the path that wound between lavender bushes. In the distance, the lights of other villas and farmhouses began to appear, pinpoints of human presence in the gathering darkness. My phone rang. Ethan, calling at what would be early morning his time. "Mom," he said without preamble, "I've been thinking about your foundation's expansion plans. Have you considered establishing a presence in Asia? There's tremendous need and opportunity there, particularly in regions where single motherhood carries significant social stigma." I smiled at his directness, so like his approach to everything. "Good morning to you too, Ethan. And no, we haven't specifically discussed Asia, though it's an interesting suggestion. What prompted this thought?" "I've been doing some research," he replied, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Did you know that in some parts of rural China, single mothers have no access to certain social benefits, or that in Japan, there's still significant discrimination in employment against single parents. There are grassroots organizations addressing these issues, but they lack resources and international connections. For the next half hour, he outlined what he had learned, the potential partnerships he had identified, and the ways in which the Foundation's model might be adapted to different cultural contexts. It was thorough, thoughtful work, the kind of preparation he would put into any professional project. "Ethan," I said when he finally paused, "this is impressive research. But why this particular focus? What drew you to this issue?" There was a brief silence, then, "I've been thinking a lot lately about purpose, about legacy. Patricia and we're expecting another child, a girl this time." "Oh, Ethan, that's wonderful news." "Thanks, Mom. We're excited. But it's got me thinking about what kind of world she'll grow up in, what values we want to instill in her." He paused again. "And about the example you've set, using your resources not just for personal comfort, but to create meaningful change. I want to be more involved in that aspect of your life, if you're open to it." The simple honesty of his words moved me deeply. This wasn't the calculated ingratiation of the past, designed to secure financial advantage. This was my son reaching for connection, for purpose, for the chance to be part of something larger than himself. "I'd like nothing better," I told him warmly. "Why don't you put together a formal proposal for the board? And perhaps you might consider joining us as an advisor on international expansion." "Really?" The boyish enthusiasm in his voice reminded me of the child he had once been, eager for approval, but too often seeking it from a father who measured worth in narrow, materialistic terms. "Really? Your business experience would be invaluable, especially as we navigate unfamiliar cultural and regulatory environments." By the time we ended our call, plans were already forming for an exploratory trip to several Asian countries, with Ethan taking the lead on research and initial contacts. It would be a new chapter for both of us, a professional collaboration founded on mutual respect and shared values rather than obligation or self-interest. As I prepared for bed that night, moving through the quiet rooms of the villa, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected ways in which my lottery fortune had multiplied. The financial windfall that had seemed so transformative at the time now appeared almost secondary to the rich harvest of changed relationships, renewed purpose, and authentic self-expression that had grown from that initial seed. In the bedroom, I paused before the antique mirror that hung above the dresser, studying the face reflected there. The silver hair, the lines etched by time and experience, the eyes that had witnessed both sorrow and joy in abundant measure. Not so long ago, I had looked in mirrors and seen only what was lacking: youth, beauty, the external markers of success that society valued. Now I saw something different, a woman who had learned, however belatedly, to recognize her own worth. Who had discovered that it's never too late to set boundaries, to require respect, to live authentically. The journey hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been moments of doubt, of anger, of grief for what could never be recovered. But standing here now, in this beautiful place that represented both my independence and my connections, I felt only gratitude for the hardships that had forged my strength, for the betrayals that had clarified my values, for the unexpected fortune that had provided not just material comfort, but the freedom to finally, fully become myself. 3 years after discovering my lottery fortune, I found myself aboard a private yacht cruising through the Greek islands. The gentle motion of the boat, the endless blue of the Aegean stretching to the horizon, the warm breeze carrying scents of salt and distant flowers, all of it felt surreal, like something from another woman's life. Yet, here I was, Margaret Wilson, once a struggling single mother who counted pennies for groceries, now sipping champagne on the deck of a luxury vessel chartered for my 70th birthday. The milestone had seemed worthy of celebration, not just for the number of years lived, but for the transformation those years had contained. "Another mimosa, Mrs. Wilson?" The steward appeared silently at my elbow, elegant in his crisp white uniform. "No, thank you, Andreas. I'm perfect as is." I smiled, gesturing to the unspoiled view. How could I possibly improve upon this moment? He nodded appreciatively. "We approach Santorini in approximately 1 hour. Lunch will be served on the aft deck in 30 minutes. After he departed, I closed my eyes, letting the sun warm my face. 70 years old. When did that happen? In my mind, I was still the young woman racing between jobs, checking homework, stretching every dollar until it screamed for mercy. It seemed impossible that so much time had passed, that the desperate years of survival had given way to this: abundance beyond imagining, peace beyond expectation. A shadow fell across my face, and I opened my eyes to find Caroline, my personal assistant, standing beside my lounge chair. A recent graduate from the Foundation's scholarship program, she had impressed me with her intelligence, organization, and subtle humor. When my previous assistant retired, Caroline had been the natural choice to take over the position. "Sorry to disturb your relaxation," she said, "but you asked me to remind you about the video call with the board at noon. It's in 20 minutes. Thank you, Caroline. I'll use the study. I've set everything up in there. The documents you requested are on the desk, and I've prepared the presentation slides according to your notes." She hesitated. "Also, your son called. He said it's not urgent, but he'd appreciate if you could call him back before tomorrow." I nodded. "I'll call him after the board meeting." I rose, adjusting my linen tunic. "Have you heard from Ms. Anderson about the Kyoto project?" "Yes, the contracts arrived this morning. I've reviewed them and everything looks in order. They're ready for your signature whenever you have time." "Excellent. Let's handle that after lunch." The study, like everything on the yacht, was a masterpiece of elegant functionality. Rich wood paneling, comfortable leather seating, and state-of-the-art technology blended seamlessly. Through the windows, I could see a distant island, its white buildings gleaming against rocky slopes. The board meeting went smoothly. The Foundation had recently expanded its operations to include programs in 5 additional countries, each adaptation tailored to local needs, while maintaining our core mission of empowering single parents. The financial reports showed healthy growth in our endowment thanks to shrewd investments. The gallery had launched a virtual exhibition platform that was attracting international attention. As the directors signed off, the final face on the screen belonged to Rebecca. Her architecture firm, now 3 years old and thriving, had designed the Foundation's headquarters, a building that had won several sustainability awards and brought her practice significant recognition in the industry. "Everyone's gone," she said when it was just the 2 of us. "How's the birthday cruise so far?" "Extraordinary," I replied truthfully, though I still feel slightly ridiculous having an entire yacht to myself. She laughed. "You're not by yourself. You have Caroline, the crew, and isn't Dr. Winters joining you tomorrow?" Judith Winters had entered my life unexpectedly at a medical conference where I was giving a keynote address about the Foundation's healthcare initiatives. A distinguished neurologist with decades of research experience, she had approached me afterward with thoughtful questions and provocative insights. What began as a professional connection had evolved into a deep friendship. We shared similar backgrounds. She, too, had raised children alone while building a career, and similar perspectives on life's later chapters. "Yes, Judith flies into Santorini tomorrow. We'll spend a few days exploring the islands together before returning to Athens." I paused. "How are things at home? How's Emma?" "She's wonderful, driving me crazy with her teenage attitude one minute, then breaking my heart with her thoughtfulness the next." Rebecca's expression softened. "She's working on something special for your birthday. Made me promise not to tell you what it is, but I think you'll be moved." I look forward to it. And your new project? The eco community? Rebecca's face lit up. We just secured the final permits. Groundbreaking next month. It's everything. I dreamed it could be, Mom. Affordable housing that's beautiful, sustainable, community-oriented. The waiting list already has over 300 families. The pride in her voice, the passion for creating spaces that enhanced lives rather than merely sheltering them, these were the qualities I had always seen in her, even when they were buried beneath ambition focused in more conventional directions. I'm so proud of you, I said simply. Her smile deepened. I learned from the best. Speaking of which, have you made a decision about the memoir? The publisher called again yesterday. I sighed. What had begun as private reflections intended, only for family, had somehow become a manuscript that attracted interest from a major publishing house. Their offer was generous. Their vision for the book aligned with my values, but something still held me back. I'm still considering it, I replied. There's something that feels presumptuous about publishing my life story. Mom, Rebecca said gently, your story isn't just about you anymore. It's about transformation, about reclaiming your worth, about using unexpected fortune in ways that create meaningful change. People need to hear that, especially women who've spent their lives putting everyone else first. Her words echoed in my mind after we ended the call. Was my personal journey truly worth sharing beyond family? Could my experiences, both the desperate struggles and the unexpected redemption, offer something valuable to others facing similar challenges? The questions followed me out to the deck where lunch awaited. A Mediterranean feast had been arranged. On the table, fresh seafood, local cheeses, olives, warm bread, and colorful salads. I ate slowly, savoring each bite while watching Santorini grow larger on the horizon, its iconic white buildings cascading down volcanic cliffs like frozen waterfalls. After lunch, I called Ethan as promised. He answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting for my call. Happy birthday, Mom, he said warmly. How's Greece treating you? Magnificently, though I'm beginning to think this yacht was a bit much. He chuckled. Nonsense. If anyone deserves a bit of luxury, it's you. Though I'm still not sure why you didn't let us come along to celebrate with you. The truth was, I had wanted this. Time alone. To reflect. To absorb. To consider the path that had brought me to this moment and the direction I wanted to take in the years ahead. But I simply said, there will be plenty of celebration when I get back. Caroline has been keeping me updated on your plans for the party. She wasn't supposed to tell you about that, he protested, though I could hear the smile in his voice. She didn't reveal any details, just confirmed that something was in the works. I paused. Caroline mentioned you wanted to speak with me. Is everything all right? Yes, everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. He took a deep breath. I've been offered a position on the board of the Asia-Pacific Economic Consortium. It would mean relocating to Singapore for at least 2 years. Ethan, that's remarkable. Congratulations. The appointment was prestigious, a recognition of his growing expertise in international development. Have you and Patricia decided? That's partly why I'm calling. Parker would stay in the States. He's starting college next fall and doesn't want to delay. But Patricia is excited about the opportunity, and with Lily only 8, it would be an amazing experience for her to live internationally for a few years. It sounds like a wonderful opportunity, I said, genuinely happy for him. When would you need to move? That's the complicated part. They want me to start in 6 weeks. He hesitated. Which means we'd miss the Foundation's 5th anniversary gala, and possibly Thanksgiving, depending on how quickly we can get settled. Ah, there it was, the real reason for his call. Not just to share his news, but to seek permission, or perhaps absolution, for prioritizing his career opportunity over family gatherings. The old Ethan would have simply announced his absence, perhaps with a perfunctory expression of regret. The fact that he was calling specifically to discuss the conflict, to acknowledge its importance, spoke volumes about how far he had come. "Ethan," I said gently, "this is an exceptional opportunity. Of course you should take it. We'll miss you at the gala and at Thanksgiving, but there will be other celebrations. Your career advancement matters too." "Are you sure?" The relief in his voice was palpable. "I know how important the Foundation's anniversary is to you. And I know how important this position is to you. Life isn't about choosing between personal fulfillment and family connection. It's about creating space for both, even when timing isn't perfect." We talked for another half-hour, discussing the practical aspects of their move and making plans for frequent video calls once they were settled. When we finally said goodbye, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My son was flourishing, making choices that reflected his values and abilities, while maintaining genuine connection with family. What more could any mother wish for? The yacht docked at Santorini just before sunset. Rather than going ashore immediately, I remained on deck, watching as the fading light transformed the white buildings to gold, then pink, then a soft lavender as darkness descended. One by one, lights appeared in windows, along pathways, strung across terraces, a glittering constellation mirroring the stars that had begun to emerge overhead. Later, in my stateroom, I opened my laptop to review the manuscript that had been causing me such uncertainty. The memoir, tentatively titled The Fortune Within, traced my journey from impoverished single motherhood through career success, family estrangement, unexpected wealth, and ultimate reconciliation. It was honest, sometimes painfully so, about my mistakes as well as my triumphs. It named no names beyond my own, but the universal patterns of sacrifice, betrayal, forgiveness, and redemption were all there, laid bare for potential readers. As I scrolled through the pages, a particular passage caught my eye. The greatest poverty I ever experienced wasn't financial, though there were times when I didn't know how I would feed my children. The true poverty was believing that my worth depended on what I could give, what I could endure, what I could sacrifice. It took the shock of betrayal, followed by the equally disorienting shock of sudden wealth, to show me a fundamental truth: that dignity isn't earned through suffering or purchased through generosity. It's inherent, waiting to be claimed. The words resonated with something deep within me, a truth I had discovered too late in life but cherished all the more for its delayed revelation. Perhaps Rebecca was right. Perhaps this story wasn't just mine anymore. Perhaps it belonged to every woman who had ever diminished herself in the name of love, every parent who had ever surrendered their dreams to secure their children's futures, every person who had ever accepted less than they deserved because they didn't know they could ask for more. I closed the laptop without making a decision, but with a growing sense that the answer was taking shape within me, not just about the memoir, but about the next chapter of my life. Morning brought the arrival of Judith, who emerged from a water taxi looking wind-blown and delighted, her silver hair escaping its elegant knot, her eyes bright with anticipation behind tortoiseshell glasses. "Margaret!" she called, waving as she approached the gangway. "What a magnificent vessel! I feel like royalty already." I greeted her with a warm embrace. "Welcome aboard! How was your flight?" "Uneventful, thank God, though I'll never understand why airplane seats are designed by people who apparently have never met a human spine." She gestured to the yacht. "This, however, looks considerably more comfortable. Show me everything." We spent the morning touring the yacht and exploring. Fiera, Santorini's main town. Judith was the perfect travel companion. Curious, knowledgeable, as happy to sit in contemplative silence absorbing a view as she was to engage in spirited conversation about art, science, politics, or personal philosophy. After lunch at a clifftop restaurant overlooking the caldera, we wandered through narrow streets lined with shops selling local crafts, artwork, and jewelry. In one small gallery, I found myself drawn to a collection of photographs, stark, powerful images of elderly Greek women, their faces deeply lined, their eyes holding stories of hardship and resilience. "These are extraordinary," Judith murmured, studying one portrait of a woman whose weathered hands were arranging flowers on what appeared to be a family grave. "They remind me of something," I replied, though I couldn't immediately identify. "What?" "Of yourself," Judith said with her characteristic directness. "Not physically, but essentially. The dignity, the strength, the sense of having weathered storms and emerged intact." Her observation struck me as profoundly true, though I would never have articulated it myself. These women, with their unvarnished beauty and quiet pride, embodied something I had been reaching for all my life, a state of being at peace with one's own story, whatever hardships it contained. On impulse, I purchased the entire collection, arranging for the photographs to be shipped to my home in the States. The gallery owner was stunned, then delighted, explaining that the photographer was her daughter, a young woman struggling to gain recognition for her work. "This will mean everything to her," she said, eyes bright with emotion. "Not just the money, but knowing someone values her vision." As we left the gallery, Judith gave me a sidelong glance. "That was a generous purchase." I shrugged. "They spoke to me. And what's the point of having money if you can't support artists whose work moves you?" She nodded thoughtfully. No, when I first met you at that conference, I thought you were simply another wealthy philanthropist. Well-intentioned, but perhaps insulated from real struggle by privilege." I couldn't have been more wrong. "What changed your mind?" "The way you spoke with the scholarship recipients afterward. Not at them, but with them. You listened as if their experiences mattered as much as your expertise. It's rare, that quality, genuine, respect that transcends differences in circumstance." Her words stayed with me as we returned to the yacht, which had relocated to a secluded cove for the evening. We dined on the deck under a canopy of stars, the lights of distant villages, twinkling like earthbound constellations along the island's ridge. Over dessert, baklava drizzled with local honey, Judith raised her glass. "To 70 years of becoming Margaret Wilson, may the next decade be even more magnificent." I touched my glass to hers, the crystal ringing clearly in the night air. "Thank you for being here to celebrate with me." "I wouldn't have missed it." She set down her glass. "Have you given any more thought to the teaching position?" "The medical school was quite persistent about wanting your answer soon." The offer had come unexpectedly, a visiting professorship at a prestigious university, teaching a seminar on philanthropic approaches to healthcare disparities. The position would combine my business experience, foundation work, and personal journey in ways that could potentially benefit a new generation of medical professionals. "I'm still considering it," I admitted. "Part of me is drawn to the challenge. The opportunity to influence future doctors' understanding of the social determinants of health. But another part wonders if I have anything useful to teach young people with far more current knowledge than mine." Judith snorted. "That's nonsense, and you know it. Technical knowledge isn't the same as wisdom. Those students would benefit enormously from your perspective." She leaned forward. "Remember what you told me about your early years as a single mother? How you encountered healthcare systems that treated you as a problem rather than a person? How different might those experiences have been if the doctors had been trained to see beyond the immediate medical issues to the whole context of your life?" Her argument was compelling, as her arguments usually were. But there was something else holding me back, a hesitation I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. Taking the position would mean scaling back my involvement with the foundation, I said slowly. Delegating more responsibility, being less hands-on with programs I've nurtured from the beginning. "And that frightens you," Judith observed. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I admitted, though it shouldn't. The foundation has an excellent team, a clear mission, strong leadership. It doesn't need me hovering over every decision." I swirled the remaining wine in my glass, watching the play of light through the golden liquid. Perhaps what truly scares me is discovering that it can thrive without me, that I'm not as essential as I believe myself to be. Judith's expression softened. Ah, the paradox of successful parenting, raising children who no longer need you. It's the same with organizations, isn't it? If you've done your job well, eventually they outgrow your constant guidance. The comparison was apt. The foundation was, in many ways, another child I had nurtured. One born not of my body, but of my values, experiences, and hopes for creating positive change in the world. And like any good parent, my ultimate goal should be its independent success, not its perpetual dependency. You're right, I conceded. It's time to trust the foundation to continue its work without my daily involvement. Time to explore new challenges. So, you'll accept the professorship? I believe I will. The decision, once made, felt right. A natural evolution rather than an abandonment. Though I reserve the right to regret it entirely when faced with a classroom full of brilliant young people expecting pearls of wisdom from their elderly instructor. Judith laughed. They'll be far too intimidated by your reputation to show any disappointment, even if you stood there reciting nursery rhymes. Her expression turned serious. But you won't disappoint them, Margaret. You'll challenge them, provoke them, perhaps occasionally infuriate them. But you won't disappoint them. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the sea a vast expanse of impossible blue stretching to the horizon. I rose early, drawn to the deck by the quality of light that exists only in the first hours of day. Santorini lay behind us now, the yacht having cruised overnight to a smaller, less touristed island, whose name I couldn't immediately recall. Caroline appeared with coffee, her efficiency somehow never intruding on moments of solitude. Good morning, Mrs. Wilson. The captain suggests we might tender ashore after breakfast if you'd like to explore. There's a Byzantine monastery at the island's highest point with remarkable frescoes. That sounds lovely. Please thank him for the suggestion. After she left, I sipped my coffee, contemplating the day ahead and the larger decisions that had crystallized overnight. I would accept the teaching position, scaling back my operational role at the foundation while maintaining strategic oversight. I would proceed with publishing the memoir, trusting that my story might offer something meaningful to others navigating similar territories of sacrifice, betrayal, and redemption. And perhaps most significantly, I would finally address the question that had been forming in my mind for months now: what to do about my children's inheritance. In the years since my lottery win, both Ethan and Rebecca had undergone profound transformations. The initially self-interested reactions to my newfound wealth had evolved into genuine respect for my autonomy, appreciation for our shared history, and commitment to values larger than personal gain. They had become people I not only loved out of natural maternal instinct, but genuinely liked and admired as individuals. The trust I had established, with its conditions focused on personal growth and charitable commitment, had served its purpose. But was it still the right approach? Did maintaining control over their inheritance, even through relatively benevolent mechanisms, suggest a lingering distrust that no longer reflected our relationships? These questions occupied my thoughts as Judith and I explored the island, climbing narrow paths to reach the ancient monastery where faded saints gazed down from cracked plaster walls with expressions of serene certainty. Whatever doubts had plagued the artist who created these images centuries ago, they had resolved them sufficiently to depict faith as an absolute, martyrdom as glory, divine judgment as unquestionable. My own certainties were fewer, my convictions, tempered by experience, my judgments softened by the recognition of human complexity. Perhaps that was wisdom, not the absence of doubt but the capacity to act thoughtfully despite it. That evening, as the yacht cruised toward our next destination, I sat in the study composing two significant emails. The first, to the university, accepting the visiting professorship with a proposed start date for the following semester. The second, to Walter Abernathy, who at 78 remained my trusted legal advisor, requesting changes to my estate plan. The modifications I outlined were substantial. The educational trusts for my grandchildren would remain unchanged, as would the endowment for the foundation. But the conditions attached to Ethan and Rebecca's inheritances would be significantly simplified. Rather than complex stipulations that attempted to ensure continued personal growth and charitable commitment, I proposed a straightforward approach. Each would receive their full share at my death, with a non-binding letter expressing my hopes for how the resources might be used to further their own highest aspirations and values. It was, I realized as I wrote, an act of faith. Faith in the people they had become, in the relationships we had rebuilt, in the understanding that true change comes from internal transformation rather than external requirements. The shift felt right, a recognition that control, even when well-intentioned, can become its own form of disrespect when it outlives its purpose. After sending the emails, I joined Judith on the deck, where a dinner of fresh fish and local vegetables awaited. We ate in companionable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky and sea in shades of orange, pink, and purple. "You seem peaceful tonight," Judith observed. "Decisions made?" I nodded. The professorship, the memoir, and some changes to my estate planning. All resolved. May I ask about the last one? Estate planning isn't a topic most people tackle. With such apparent serenity. I explained the modifications I had requested, the shift from conditional control to unconditional trust. It feels like closing a circle somehow, acknowledging the growth that's occurred on all sides. Judith raised her glass. To evolution, theirs and yours, though I'd say yours is the more remarkable transformation. How so? You were willing to sacrifice everything, your comfort, your dreams, your sense of self, for your children's welfare, Judith replied. Then, when circumstances revealed the imbalance in those relationships, you had the courage to reclaim your worth rather than continuing patterns that diminished you. And now, having established healthy boundaries and rebuilt those relationships on stronger foundations, you're confident enough to loosen your protective controls. She smiled. It's a remarkable journey of emotional evolution. I considered her words, acknowledging their truth while recognizing they told only part of the story. I had help, I said finally. The lottery provided options that most women, in similar situations, never receive. I wonder sometimes how many mothers remain trapped in unhealthy family dynamics simply because they lack the financial independence to establish boundaries. Which is precisely why your foundation's work is so important, Judith pointed out, and why your memoir could be valuable to others. The specific catalyst, a lottery win, may be unique, but the underlying principles of self-respect, boundary setting, and authentic connection have universal application. As we continued our conversation, the yacht glided smoothly through darkening waters, the stars brightening overhead in a celestial display impossible to witness from light-polluted cities. I felt a profound sense of contentment, not the passive satisfaction of having achieved all my goals, but the deeper peace that comes from alignment between one's values and actions, between one's past and future. The remainder of the birthday cruise unfolded in a perfect balance of exploration and relaxation. We visited ancient ruins where civilizations had risen and fallen, leaving behind stone testaments to human ingenuity and ambition. We discovered hidden coves accessible only by water, swimming in crystal-clear seas teeming with colorful fish. We wandered through village markets, sampling local delicacies and conversing with residents whose families had inhabited these islands for generations. Throughout it all, I found myself noticing details I might once have overlooked, the particular quality of light at different hours, the varied textures of stone and wood and fabric, the subtle expressions that passed across faces during conversation. It was as if, having secured the larger patterns of my life, I was now free to appreciate its intricate particulars. On our final evening, as the yacht made its way back toward Athens, Caroline arranged a special dinner on deck. The table was set with fine china and crystal, adorned with arrangements of local flowers and illuminated by candles protected from the gentle breeze by glass hurricanes. The chef had prepared a multi-course meal showcasing the finest Greek specialties, each dish more exquisite than the last. "This is magnificent, Caroline," I said, as she presented a bottle of rare vintage wine. "You've outdone yourself." She smiled, pleased by the recognition. "It seemed fitting to conclude your birthday celebration on a memorable note." She hesitated, then added, "If you'll permit me a personal observation, Mrs. Wilson, working with you these past 2 years has been a privilege. You've shown me what's possible when talent meets opportunity backed by genuine support." The simple sincerity of her words touched me deeply. Caroline had blossomed during her time with me, growing from a promising but inexperienced graduate into a confident professional with remarkable capabilities. Her success represented exactly what I had hoped to achieve through the foundation, not creating dependency, but providing the resources and encouragement necessary for individuals to realize their potential. "The privilege has been mine, Caroline," I replied warmly. "And please, when it's just us, call me Margaret." After dinner, Judith and I lingered on deck, reluctant to retire despite the late hour. The night was perfect, warm without being humid, the sky ablaze with stars, the rhythmic sound of water against the hull creating a soothing backdrop for conversation. "Have you thought about what comes next?" Judith asked, continuing our earlier discussion. "After the professorship, I mean." I laughed. "Isn't that enough of a challenge to be going on with? I'm 70 years old, starting a new career in academia." "70 is nothing these days," she dismissed with a wave of her hand. "My colleague Regina began studying quantum physics at 75 and published her first paper at 80. She's 87 now and just received a major research grant." She gave me a searching look. "So, yes, what comes after the professorship? What dreams haven't you pursued yet?" The question gave me pause. For so much of my life, dreams had been luxuries I couldn't afford. First because of financial constraints, then because of time limitations, and finally because of entrenched patterns of putting others' needs before my own. The freedom to imagine futures based solely on personal desire remained somewhat foreign. "I haven't thought that far ahead," I admitted, "though I've been considering spending more time at the Tuscan Villa, perhaps establishing a residency program there for artists who are also single parents." Judith nodded approvingly. "That sounds perfect, combining your love of art with practical support for a community you understand intimately." She smiled. "And selfishly, I'd enjoy visiting you in such a beautiful setting." The casual reference to future visits, the easy assumption of continued friendship, warmed me unexpectedly. For decades, my relationships had been defined primarily by family bonds or professional connections. The development of friendships based simply on mutual enjoyment and respect was yet another gift of this new chapter in my life. As the conversation drifted to other topics, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The desperate years of struggling single parenthood seemed almost to belong to another lifetime, though their lessons remained etched in my character. The middle period, career success achieved at great personal cost, felt closer, but still distinct from my present reality. And the most recent chapter, beginning with the lottery win and continuing through the painful revelations and eventual healing that followed, had transformed me in ways still unfolding. What remained constant through all these phases was an essential core of resilience, a capacity to adapt without surrender, to bend without breaking. That strength, I now recognized, had always been mine, though circumstances had sometimes obscured it even from myself. The yacht reached Athens the following morning. As we prepared to disembark, I felt a mixture of gratitude for the perfect interlude and anticipation for what lay ahead. Judith was flying directly back to the States for a medical conference while I planned to spend 2 days in Athens before returning home. On the dock, we embraced warmly. Then, when circumstances revealed the imbalance in those relationships, you had the courage to reclaim your worth rather than continuing patterns that diminished you. And now, having established healthy boundaries and rebuilt those relationships on stronger foundations, you're confident enough to loosen your protective controls. She smiled. It's a remarkable journey of emotional evolution. I considered her words, acknowledging their truth while recognizing they told only part of the story. I had help, I said finally. The lottery provided options that most women, in similar situations, never receive. I wonder sometimes how many mothers remain trapped in unhealthy family dynamics simply because they lack the financial independence to establish boundaries. Which is precisely why your foundation's work is so important, Judith pointed out, and why your memoir could be valuable to others. The specific catalyst, a lottery win, may be unique, but the underlying principles of self-respect, boundary setting, and authentic connection have universal application. As we continued our conversation, the yacht glided smoothly through darkening waters, the stars brightening overhead in a celestial display impossible to witness from light-polluted cities. I felt a profound sense of contentment, not the passive satisfaction of having achieved all my goals, but the deeper peace that comes from alignment between one's values and actions, between one's past and future. The remainder of the birthday cruise unfolded in a perfect balance of exploration and relaxation. We visited ancient ruins where civilizations had risen and fallen, leaving behind stone testaments to human ingenuity and ambition. We discovered hidden coves accessible only by water, swimming in crystal-clear seas teeming with colorful fish. We wandered through village markets, sampling local delicacies and conversing with residents whose families had inhabited these islands for generations. Throughout it all, I found myself noticing details I might once have overlooked, the particular quality of light at different hours, the varied textures of stone and wood and fabric, the subtle expressions that passed across faces during conversation. It was as if, having secured the larger patterns of my life, I was now free to appreciate its intricate particulars. On our final evening, as the yacht made its way back toward Athens, Caroline arranged a special dinner on deck. The table was set with fine china and crystal, adorned with arrangements of local flowers and illuminated by candles protected from the gentle breeze by glass hurricanes. The chef had prepared a multi-course meal showcasing the finest Greek specialties, each dish more exquisite than the last. "This is magnificent, Caroline," I said, as she presented a bottle of rare vintage wine. "You've outdone yourself." She smiled, pleased by the recognition. "It seemed fitting to conclude your birthday celebration on a memorable note." She hesitated, then added, "If you'll permit me a personal observation, Mrs. Wilson, working with you these past 2 years has been a privilege. You've shown me what's possible when talent meets opportunity backed by genuine support." The simple sincerity of her words touched me deeply. Caroline had blossomed during her time with me, growing from a promising but inexperienced graduate into a confident professional with remarkable capabilities. Her success represented exactly what I had hoped to achieve through the foundation, not creating dependency, but providing the resources and encouragement necessary for individuals to realize their potential. "The privilege has been mine, Caroline," I replied warmly. "And please, when it's just us, call me Margaret." After dinner, Judith and I lingered on deck, reluctant to retire despite the late hour. The night was perfect, warm without being humid, the sky ablaze with stars, the rhythmic sound of water against the hull creating a soothing backdrop for conversation. "Have you thought about what comes next?" Judith asked, continuing our earlier discussion. "After the professorship, I mean." I laughed. "Isn't that enough of a challenge to be going on with? I'm 70 years old, starting a new career in academia." 70 is nothing these days. she dismissed with a wave of her hand. My colleague Regina began studying quantum physics at 75 and published her first paper at 80. She's 87 now and just received a major research grant. She gave me a searching look. So, yes, what comes after the professorship? What dreams haven't you pursued yet? The question gave me pause. For so much of my life, dreams had been luxuries I couldn't afford. First because of financial constraints, then because of time limitations, and finally because of entrenched patterns of putting others' needs before my own. The freedom to imagine futures based solely on personal desire remained somewhat foreign. I haven't thought that far ahead, I admitted, though I've been considering spending more time at the Tuscan villa, perhaps establishing a residency program there for artists who are also single parents. Judith nodded approvingly. That sounds perfect, combining your love of art with practical support for a community you understand intimately. She smiled. And selfishly, I'd enjoy visiting you in such a beautiful setting. The casual reference to future visits, the easy assumption of continued friendship, warmed me unexpectedly. For decades, my relationships had been defined primarily by family bonds or professional connections. The development of friendships based simply on mutual enjoyment and respect was yet another gift of this new chapter in my life. As the conversation drifted to other topics, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The desperate years of struggling single parenthood seemed almost to belong to another lifetime, though their lessons remained etched in my character. The middle period, career success achieved at great personal cost, felt closer, but still distinct from my present reality. And the most recent chapter, beginning with the lottery win and continuing through the painful revelations and eventual healing that followed, had transformed me in ways still unfolding. What remained constant through all these phases was an essential core of resilience, a capacity to adapt without surrender, to bend without breaking. That strength, I now recognized, had always been mine, though circumstances had sometimes obscured it even from myself. The yacht reached Athens the following morning. As we prepared to disembark, I felt a mixture of gratitude for the perfect interlude and anticipation for what lay ahead. Judith was flying directly back to the States for a medical conference while I planned to spend 2 days in Athens before returning home. On the dock, we embraced warmly. "Thank you for sharing your birthday celebration," she said. "It was extraordinary." "Thank you for making it so," I replied. "I'll see you soon at home." As her taxi pulled away, Caroline approached with my schedule for the day. "Your hotel suite is ready whenever you'd like to check in," she informed me. "The appointment at the museum is confirmed for 2 o'clock, and dinner reservations have been made at the restaurant you requested for 8. Your car and driver are available for the entire day." "Thank you, Caroline. Why don't you take some personal time this afternoon? Athens is too beautiful to experience only through work obligations." She hesitated. "Are you certain? I'm happy to accompany you to the museum." "Absolutely certain. Enjoy the city. We'll reconnect tomorrow for the foundation meetings." Left to my own devices, I decided to walk rather than use the car immediately. Athens in early autumn was pleasantly warm, the legendary light casting, everything in a golden glow that seemed to bridge past and present. I wandered through narrow streets, eventually finding myself in a small square where an elderly woman was selling flowers from a wooden cart. Her face, deeply lined by sun and time, reminded me of the photographs I had purchased on Santorini. There was the same quiet dignity in her bearing, the same impression of a life fully inhabited despite whatever hardships it had contained. On impulse, I bought several bunches of fragrant blossoms, overpaying deliberately but discreetly. "Evcharisto," she said, her smile revealing missing teeth but genuine warmth. "Beautiful lady, beautiful flowers." The simple exchange, flowers traded for money, smiles exchanged freely, felt somehow significant, a tiny, perfect moment in the vast tapestry of ordinary interactions that compose a human life. How many such moments had I missed in my younger years? Too busy, too worried, too focused on survival or achievement to notice the small perfections occurring all around me. I continued my exploration of the city, eventually making my way to the museum where I had arranged to view a private collection of artifacts related to ancient women's lives. The curator, a distinguished archaeologist in her 60s, guided me through displays of household items, jewelry, ceremonial objects, and written records that together painted a portrait of women's experiences across centuries of Greek history. "What strikes me," I commented as we examined a delicately carved spinning implement, "is how little has fundamentally changed. The specific challenges differ, but the underlying patterns, balancing family responsibilities with personal needs, navigating social expectations, finding meaning within constrained choices, remain remarkably consistent." The curator nodded. "Indeed. Though I like to think we're moving, however slowly, toward more equitable arrangements." She gestured toward a stone tablet covered in ancient Greek text. This records a legal case in which a widow successfully argued for control of her deceased husband's property against his male relatives. Her victory was exceptional for the time, but it established a precedent that gradually expanded women's property rights. "Progress measured in generations rather than years," I observed. "Exactly so. Which is why the historical perspective can be both humbling and encouraging. Change happens, but rarely as quickly or completely as we might wish." Her words resonated with my own experience of transformation. The gradual shift from accepting disrespect as inevitable to requiring dignity as essential. From defining myself through sacrifice to valuing my inherent worth. These changes, though profound in their impact, had not occurred overnight, but through a process of revelation, reflection, and conscious choice repeated daily, until new patterns replaced the old. After leaving the museum, I spent the remainder of the afternoon sitting at an outdoor cafe overlooking ancient ruins, sipping strong Greek coffee and observing the interplay of tourists and locals, contemporary life unfolding against a backdrop of historical significance. My thoughts drifted to the memoir, to the changes I wanted to make before authorizing its publication. The framework was sound, the narrative arc complete, but something was missing. A final perspective that had only become clear during this birthday journey. The story needed to end not just with my personal resolution, but with a recognition of its place in a larger pattern of women's experiences across time and culture. Not to diminish its specificity, but to connect it to the universal struggles and triumphs that bind us across generations. That evening, dining alone at a restaurant perched high on a hillside with views of the illuminated Acropolis, I began mentally drafting the epilogue that would complete the manuscript. It would acknowledge both the privilege that had accelerated my journey of self-reclamation and the underlying principles that could be applied regardless of circumstance. It would express gratitude for second chances while recognizing that many women never receive them. And it would end with a simple truth that had taken me 7 decades to fully comprehend. That love, whether for children, partners, or oneself, flourishes only when rooted in mutual respect and bounded by the courage to require dignity. The waiter approached, interrupting my thoughts. "Excuse me, madame. There is a call for you at the front desk. A Miss Caroline says there is an urgent family matter." Alarmed, I followed him to the phone. Caroline's voice was apologetic, but concerned. "I'm so sorry to interrupt your evening, Margaret, but Rebecca asked me to reach you immediately. Emma has been in an accident." My heart constricted. "How serious? What happened?" "A car accident after school. She's in surgery now. Broken leg, possible internal injuries. Rebecca asked if you could cut your trip short. There's a commercial flight leaving Athens at midnight that would get you to New York by tomorrow afternoon." "Book it immediately," I instructed, my mind already shifting to logistics. "And arrange for the jet to meet me in New York for the final leg home." "Already done," she replied, her efficiency unimpaired by the late hour. A car will pick you up at the restaurant. In 30 minutes to take you to your hotel. You'll have time to pack before heading to the airport. As I returned to my table to settle the bill, I felt a familiar sensation, the narrowing of focus that occurs in crisis, the setting aside of personal concerns in response to a loved one's need. But this time, the response came not from obligation or fear, but from love freely given, untainted by martyrdom or expectation of reciprocity. The journey home passed in a blur of airports, airplane cabins, and anxious waiting. I received updates from Rebecca at each connection. The surgery had gone well. Emma was stable. The prognosis was good, but recovery would be lengthy. By the time I reached the hospital, nearly 24 hours after receiving the news, exhaustion had settled into my bones, but concern for my granddaughter overrode physical discomfort. I found Rebecca in Emma's room, slumped in a chair beside the bed where the girl lay sleeping, her leg elevated in a cast, monitors beeping steadily beside her. Rebecca looked up as I entered, relief washing over her tired face. "Mom," she whispered, rising to embrace me. "You didn't have to come back early." "Of course I did," I replied simply. "How is she?" "Better than expected. The surgery went well. No spinal injuries, thank God. But it's going to be a long recovery. Physical therapy, maybe another surgery later for the leg." She sighed, pushing hair from her face with a shaking hand. "I haven't left since they brought her in. I can't seem to make myself go home, even though the doctors say she's out of danger." "I understand completely," I said, remembering nights spent beside small beds, watching for fever to break, for breathing to ease, for pain to subside. The visceral terror of a child's suffering never diminishes, no matter how old they or you become. At that moment, Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Grandma?" Her voice was thick with medication. "Did you come all the way from Greece?" "I did," I confirmed, moving to the bedside and taking her hand gently. "As soon as I heard what happened." She smiled drowsily. "That's just like in your story, the one about the Fortun." I glanced questioningly at Rebecca, who explained, "She's been in and out, a little confused from the pain medication. She's talking about your memoir. I've been reading it to her while we waited for news about the surgery." "You've read the manuscript?" This surprised me. I hadn't yet shared it with either of my children, uncertain how they would receive my unvarnished account of our history. Rebecca nodded. "You left a copy on your desk at home. I found it when I was looking for some foundation files." Her expression was apologetic but not regretful. "Once I started, I couldn't stop. It's remarkable, Mom. Painful in places, but honest in a way that feels healing rather than accusatory." Emma's eyes had closed again, her breathing deepening into sleep. I lowered my voice. "And you've been reading it to Emma?" "Just parts, the triumphant parts, about reclaiming your worth, about finding strength you didn't know you had." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. When they first brought her in, she was so scared. The readings seemed to calm her, remind her that courage runs in the family. The moment felt surreal, my words written as a personal reckoning, now serving as comfort to my granddaughter in her hour of need. The circle of influence expanding beyond anything I could have anticipated. Rebecca continued, her voice low but intense. "I want her to understand what you've taught me, that loving someone doesn't mean accepting disrespect, that sacrifice without boundaries becomes self-erasure, that true strength lies not in enduring mistreatment, but in requiring better." I squeezed her hand, too moved to speak immediately. Finally, I managed, "It sounds like you understand the memoir's message perfectly." "I do now," she acknowledged, "though I wouldn't have 10 years ago, or even 5, probably." She hesitated. "There's something else. When they called from the school about the accident, my first thought wasn't about work deadlines or client meetings. It was simply, Emma needs me. Everything else fell away in an instant." She looked directly at me. Was that how it was for you when we were young? Always, I confirmed, from the moment you were born. I never really understood that kind of love until I became a mother myself. And even then, I think I missed something essential about it. That its power lies not in what it endures, but in what it nurtures, in who it helps us become. She glanced at Emma's sleeping form. I want to be like you, Mom. Not just for her sake, but for my own. The words were perhaps the most profound gift I had ever received. Recognition not of what I had sacrificed, but of what I had preserved. My essential dignity, my capacity for joy, my belief in the possibility of genuine connection founded on mutual respect. You already are, I told her, meaning it completely. In all the ways that matter most. As Emma continued to sleep peacefully, Rebecca and I talked quietly into the night, our conversation weaving between past and present, childhood memories and current challenges, shared history and individual journeys. There was a new quality to our exchange, a depth of understanding that transcended the usual boundaries between mother and daughter, a recognition of each other as women who had faced similar struggles and found their own paths toward resolution. In that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the mechanical sounds of healing, I felt the final pieces of my own journey falling into place. The fortune that had initially seemed purely financial had multiplied in ways I could never have predicted, yielding returns measured not in dollars but in restored relationships, renewed purpose, and the profound satisfaction of having reclaimed the worth that had always been mine, waiting to be recognized. The path had not been easy or straightforward. There had been moments of doubt, of anger, of grief for what could never be recovered. But sitting here now, holding my daughter's hand as we watched over my granddaughter, I felt only gratitude for the hardships that had forged my strength, for the betrayals that had clarified my values, and for the unexpected twist of fate that had provided not just material comfort, but the freedom to finally, fully become myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them. Out!